Welcome back. The National Consumer Commission says it's again convened a meeting with Samsung Electronics South Africa to assess the company's progress with recalling Samsung Galaxy Note 7 mobile phones. A problem with the phone's battery has caused some of them to burst into flames. During an initial global recall, Samsung replaced some of the phones, but then there were reports that the new models had also caught fire. This led to Samsung telling Note 7 owners to stop using the phones and return them before permanently discontinuing the Note 7. Well, the Commission says consumers here are fortunate that the defect was detected before the phone could be launched in South Africa. To discuss, we're now joined by the Commissioner at the National Consumer Commission, Ebrahim Mohamed. He's live from our studios in Pretoria. Mr. Mohamed, thank you for joining us. So some were sold pre-launch in South Africa, some apparently bought through overseas channels. How many South Africans are walking around with potentially explosive phones?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on your program, and good evening to all your viewers and yourself. At the last count, there were about only 10 of these Note 7s by Samsung phones that were still out there in the market. That, however, excludes the number of telephones, and this poses a challenge to Samsung, and it relates to the parallel imports, which means phones brought into South Africa from outside the borders of South Africa. And in this case, it is thought that approximately most of the phones brought in hail from Dubai.
Okay, so there are other phones as well. You met with Samsung on Tuesday. What was the outcome of that?
Well, we met with Samsung on Tuesday to establish what progress had been made. And Samsung was very forthright, honest, and we had a very frank discussion. What they firstly acknowledged that they believed it to be a challenge, the parallel imports, but they believed that the ones sold in South Africa were extremely limited. At the initial count, the distribution line or distribution list, a number of about 55 phones were talked about. And then a few days later, another count was done, and there were then only 23 out there in the market. And the latest one, as I mentioned earlier, is only 10. What they have done with regards to the parallel imports, or the ones coming in from outside of the country, is that they have partnered with the Airports Company of South Africa, where they have set up kiosks at all major airports, where they can receive these phones, international airports, and they can replace them with other telephones and with whatever else they provide to the consumer. That is at least one method that they are employing in order to try to ensure that the phones do not come into the country.
All right, Mr. Mohamed, so this isn't huge for South Africa, but let's look at the bigger picture of consumer protection. As far as recalls go, how do you think this one was handled in South Africa, around the world as well?
I am not too certain about what's happening around the world, but I can speak for South Africa. And I must say that the manufacturer, supplier, Samsung, has really acted with good governance. They have immediately recognized the problem. They are doing what they can in order to make sure that all those who are still in possession of the Samsung Note 7s return them. They have gone out in public. They've also partnered with AXA and at the airports and they are doing their best. They want to protect their brand. They want to protect their customer base, their reputation, their good name. And also, there's also a liability that attaches to them if these phones happen to be hazardous or unsafe or explode or whatever.
The brand has been pummeled, and it is quite crazy that a device that you hold to your ear explodes. We live in this world of safety testing, of regulation. Do you think that with all these protections, with the new technology out there, consumers are safer?
Yes, one would expect consumers to be much safer. But we do have problems that arise from time to time.
I understand it's still a voluntary recall, so these few people who bring in phones or have phones can go and give their phone to Samsung and get money back or a device back. Are you encouraging Samsung to really urge them to do so? They have to hand in those phones.
Yes, we would encourage all consumers who are in possession of Note 7s, because it is hazardous and it is dangerous. And these phones can pose a safety risk to consumers. And therefore, we encourage, even exhort all consumers with these Note 7s to return them to Samsung. And Samsung is also offering an incentive, by the way. They are, in addition to the phones that they are replacing, they're also giving an additional tablet to consumers who have these phones.
All right, thank you very much for your time. That was Ebrahim Mohamed, Commissioner at the National Consumer Commission of South Africa.